Good morrow, scholars. Welcome back to Artemis Fowl. I have to cough. I can't quite remember where we left off yesterday, and I don't feel like going through the video because I'm kind of lazy. I'm still tired. Anyway, I'm pretty sure I know where, but we're going to go ahead and start from here just to give us some context. Mulch held his breath and twisted the dial one cog at a time. To the normal ear, even with amplification, the clicks would have seemed uniform. But to Mulch, each cog had a distinctive signature, and when a ratchet caught, it was so loud as to be deafening. One, he breathed. Hurry up, convict, your time is running out. Allergies. I can't do it. Anyway, you interrupted to tell me that? I can see now how you made Commander, Julius. Convict, I'm going to. But it was no use. Mulch had removed his earpiece, slipping it into his pocket. Now he could devote his full attention to the task at hand. There was a noise outside. In the hall. Let's not go there. Someone was coming. About the size of an elephant, by the sound of it. No doubt this was the man-mountain that had made mincemeat of the retrieval squad. Mulch blinked a bead of sweat from his eye. Concentrate. Concentrate. The cogs clicked by, millimeter by millimeter. Nothing was catching. The floor seemed to be hopping gently, though he could be imagining it. Click, click. Come on, come on. His fingers were slick with perspiration, the dial slipping between them. Mulch wiped them on his jerkin. Now, baby, come on, talk to me. Click, thunk. Yes! Mulch twisted the handle. Nothing. Still an obstruction. He ran a fingertip over the metal face. There. A small irregularity. A micro keyhole. Hole. What? Too small for your average lockpick. Time for a little trick he'd learned in prison. Quickly, though, his stomach was bubbling like a stew in the oven, and the footsteps were getting closer. Selecting a sturdy chin hair, Mulch fed it gently into the tiny hole. When the tip reappeared, he pulled the root from his chin. What? The hair immediately stiffened, retaining the shape of the lock's interior. Mulch held his breath and twisted, smooth as a goblin's lie. The lock opened. Beautiful. In moments like these, it was almost worth all the jail time. Almost. The klepto don't do crime and go to jail. I mean, wait. Don't do crime. Don't visit jail unless you have to. Don't go to jail. Don't be in a situation where you have to go to jail. I don't know. I don't know. The kleptomaniac dwarf swung back the little door. Beautiful work. Almost worthy of a fairy forge. Light as a wafer. Inside was a small chamber, and in the chamber was... Oh, gods above, breathed Mulch. Then things came to a head rather rapidly. The shock that Mulch had experienced communicated itself to his bowels, and they decided the excess air had to go. Mulch knew the symptoms. Jelly legs, bumbling cramps, wobbly behind. In the seconds remained to him, he snatched the object from the safe and, leaning over, he clasped his knees for support. The constrained wind had built itself up to a mini cyclone intensity and could not be constrained, and so it exited, rather abrasively, blowing open Mulch's back flap and slamming into the rather large gentleman who had been sneaking up behind him. Anyway, Artemis was glued to the monitors. This was the time when things traditionally went wrong for kidnappers, the third quarter of operations. Having been successful thus far, the abductors tended to relax, light up a few cigarettes, get chatty with their hostages. Next thing they knew, they were flat on their faces with a dozen guns pointed at the backs of their heads. Not Artemis Fowl. He didn't make mistakes. No doubt the fairies were reviewing the tapes of their first negotiating session. Jeff Sessions must die. Anyway, should not have been said. Anyway. I didn't mean it. Anyway. Where the heck was I? Searching for anything that would give them a way in. Well, it was there all right. All they had to do was look. Buried just deep enough to make it look accidental. It was possible that Commander Root would try another ruse. He was a wily one, no doubt about it. One would not take kindly to being, bested by a child. He would bear watching. The mere thought of Root gave Artemis the shivers. He decided to check in again. He inspected the monitors. Juliet was still in the kitchen, scrubbing at the sink, washing the vegetables. Captain Short was on her bunk, quiet as the grave. No more bed banging. Perhaps he had been wrong about her. Perhaps there was no plan. Butler stood at his post outside Holly's cell. Odd. He should have been on his rounds by now. Artemis grabbed a walkie-talkie. Sorry. Butler? Roger, base receiving. Shouldn't you be on your rounds? There was a pause. I am, Artemis, patrolling the main landing. Coming up on the safe room. I'm waving at you right now. Artemis glanced at the landing cameras. Deserted, from every angle. Definitely no waving manservant. He studied the monitors, counting under his breath. There, every 10 seconds, a slight jump on every screen. A loop, he cried, jumping from his chair. They're feeding us a loop. Over the speaker, he could hear Butler's pace quickening to a run. The safe room. Artemis' stomach dropped into a queasy hell. Duped. He, Artemis Fowl, had been duped, even though he'd known it was coming. Inconceivable. I really like that movie. If you know what I'm talking about, be sure to let me know down in the comments. It was arrogance that had done it. His own blinding arrogance, and now the entire plan could collapse around his ears. Sorry. He switched the walkie-talkie to Juliet's band. It was a pity now that he'd taken the house's intercom offline, but it didn't operate on a secure frequency. Juliet? Receiving. Where are you right now? In the kitchen, breaking my nails on this grater. Leave it, Juliet. Check on the prisoner. But, Artemis, the carrot sticks will dry out. Leave it, Juliet, shouted Artemis. Drop everything and check on the prisoner. Juliet obediently dropped everything, including the walkie-talkie. She'd sulked for days now. Never mind. There was no time to worry about a teenage girl's bruised ego. He had more important matters to attend to. I need some water. There we go. Artemis depressed the master switch on the computerized surveillance system. His only chance of purging the loop was a complete reboot. After several agonizing moments of screen snow, the monitors jumped and settled. Things were not as they had seemed only seconds before. There was a grotesque thing in the safe room. It had apparently discovered the secret compartment. Not only that, but it had managed to open the whisper lock. Amazing. Butler had it covered, though. He was sneaking up behind the creature, and any moment now, the intruder would find itself nose down in the carpet. Artemis switched his attention to Holly. The elf was back to bed banging, slamming the frame down over and over again, as though she could. It hit Artemis then, like a blast from a water cannon. If Holly had somehow smuggled an acorn in there, then 1 square centimeter of ground would be enough. If Juliet left that door open. Juliet, he shouted into the walkie-talkie. Juliet, don't go in there. But it was useless. The girl's walkie-talkie lay buzzing on the kitchen floor, and Artemis could only watch helplessly as Butler's sister strode toward the cell door, muttering about carrots. The safe room, exclaimed Butler, quickening his pace. His instinct was to go in all guns blazing, but training took over. Fairy hardware was most definitely superior to his own, And who knew how many barrels were aimed at the other side of the door right now? No, caution was most definitely the best part, valor in this particular situation. He placed a palm against the wood, feeling for vibration. Nothing. No machinery then. Butler curled his fingers around the knob, twisting gently. With his other hand, he drew a Sig Sauer automatic from his shoulder holster. No time to fetch the dart rifle. He would have to shoot to kill. The door swung open noiselessly, as Butler knew it would, having oiled every hinge in the house himself. Before him was, well, to be honest, Butler wasn't quite sure what it was. If he didn't know better, that is, at first glance, he could have sworn that the thing resembled nothing more than an enormous quivering. Suddenly the thing exploded, jettisoning an amazing amount of tunnel waste directly at the unfortunate manservant. It was like being battered with 100 sledgehammers simultaneously. Butler was lifted bodily and flung against the wall. And as he lay there, consciousness slipping away from him, he prayed that Master Artemis hadn't managed to capture the moment on video. It's nice to know that he's just like got that little bit of humanity in him. You know, he's just enough to make him endearing and not like a backdrop piece. Anyway, Holly was weakening. The bed frame was nearly twice her body weight, and the ridges were tearing cruel welts into her palms. But she couldn't stop now, not when she was so close. She slammed the post into the concrete again. A cloud of great dust spiraled around her legs. Any second now, Fowl would tumble to her plan, and she'd get the hypodermic treatment again. But until then, she gritted her teeth against the pain, heaving the bed frame to knee height. Then she saw it. A sliver of brown among the gray. Could it be true? Pain forgotten, Captain Short dropped the bed, sinking quickly to her knees. There was indeed a small patch of earth poking through the cement. Holly fumbled the acorn from her boot, clasping it tightly in bloody fingers. Ow! Not itchy. You know, the whole welts thing on her hands? Oh, man. Anyway, "I'll return you to the earth," she whispered, warming her fist into the tiny space, "and claim the gift that is my right." Nothing happened for a heartbeat, perhaps two. Then Holly felt the magic rush up her arm like a jolt from an electrified troll fence. Oh wow, that'd be a lot of electricity. The shock sent her spinning across the room. For a moment, the world swirled in a disconcerting kaleidoscope of color. But when it settled, Holly was no longer the defeated elf she had been. Let's see. What the heck was that? Something popped up on my screen, I thought. Anyway. "Right, Master Fowl," she grinned, watching the blue sparks of fairy magic seal her wounds. "Let's see what I have to do to get you permission to leave this place." "Drop everything," sulked Juliet. "Drop everything and check the prisoner." She flicked the blonde tresses expertly over her shoulder. "But you must think I'm his maid or something." She hammered on the cell door with the flat of her hand. "I'm coming in now, fairy girl, so if you're doing anything embarrassing, please stop." Juliet punched the combination into the keypad. "And no, I don't have your vegetables or your washed fruit, but it's not my fault. Artemis insisted I'd come right down." Juliet stopped talking because there was nobody listening. She was preaching to an empty room. She waited for her brain to pass on an explanation. Nothing came. Eventually, the notion to take another look filtered down. She took a tentative step into the concrete cube. Nothing. Only a slight shimmering in the shadows, like a mist. It was probably these stupid glasses. How are you supposed to see anything wearing mirrored sunglasses underground? And they were so 90s. They weren't even retro yet. Again, it really tells you the time period, provided you knew about the time period at the time. So, younger viewers would have no idea, but anyway. Juliet glanced guiltily at the monitor. Just a quick peek. What harm could it do? She whipped up the frame, sending her eyeballs spinning around the room. Oh no. And that instant a figure materialized before her, just stepped out of the air. It was Holly. She was smiling. Oh, it's you. How did you... The fairy interrupted with a wave of her hand. Why don't you take off those glasses, Juliet? They really don't suit you. She's right, thought Juliet. What a lovely voice. Like a choir all on its own. How could you argue with a voice like that? Sure. Caveman glasses off. Cool voice, by the way. Do, re, mi, and all that. Holly decided not to try deciphering Juliet's comments. I was going to say compliments. It was hard enough when the girl was in full control of her brain. Now, a simple question. No problem. What a great idea. How many people in the house? Juliet thought. One, and one, and one, and another one? No, Mrs. Fowl wasn't there. 3, she said finally. Me and Butler and of course Artemis. Mrs. Fowl was here, but she went bye-bye. She went bye-bye. Juliet giggled. She'd made a joke. A good one, too. Holly drew a breath to ask for clarification, then thought better of it. A mistake, as it turned out. Has anyone else been here? Anyone like me? Juliet chewed her lip. There was one little man, in a uniform like yours. Not cute, though, not one bit. Just shouted and smoked a smelly cigar. Terrible complexion, red as a tomato. Holly almost smiled. Root had come himself. No doubt the negotiations had been disastrous. No one else? Not that I know of. If you see that man again, tell him to lay off the red meat. He's a coronary... I've never been able to pronounce that word. Waiting to happen. Holly swallowed a grin. Juliet was the only human she knew who was probably more lucid under the mesmer. Yeah, I would say so. Okay, I'll tell him. Now, Juliet, I want you to stay in my room, and no matter what you hear, don't come out. Juliet frowned. This room? It's so boring. No TV or anything. Can't I go up to the lounge? No, you have to stay here. Anyway, they just installed a wall television, cinema size. Wrestling 24 hours a day. Juliet almost fainted with pleasure. She ran into the cell, gasping at her as her imagination supplied the pictures. Holly shook her head. Well, she thought, at least one of us is happy. Mulch gave his rear end a shake to dislodge any clumps of earth. Oh, gosh. If only his mother could see him now, spraying mud on the mud people. That was irony, or something like it. Mulch had never been big on vocabulary in school. That or poetry. He'd never seen the point. Down the mines. In the mines. In the mines. Anyway, I can't help myself. There were only 2 phrases of any importance. Look, gold, and cave in, everybody out. No hidden meanings there, or rhymes. The dwarf buttoned his back flap, which had been blasted open by the gale emanating from his nether regions. Time to make a run for it. Whatever hope he'd had of escaping undiscovered had been blown. Literally. Mulch retrieved his earpiece, screwing it firmly into his ear. Well, you never knew. Even the LEP might prove useful. When I get my hands on you, convict, you'll wish you'd stayed down those mines. Mulch sighed. Ah, well, nothing new there, then. Clasping the safe's treasure tightly in his fist, the dwarf turned to retrace his steps. To his utter amazement, there was a human entangled in the banisters. Mulch was not one bit surprised that his recyclings had managed to hurl the elephantine mudman several yards through the air. Dwarf gas had been known to cause avalanches in the Alps. What did surprise him was the fact that the man had managed to get so close to him in the first place. You're good, said Mulch, wagging a finger at the unconscious bodyguard. But nobody takes a body blow from Mulch Diggums and stays on their feet. The madman stirred, the whites of his eyes showing beneath fluttering lids. Root's voice crackled in the dwarf's ears. Get a move on, Mulch Diggums, before the mudman gets up and rearranges your innards. He took out an entire retrieval team, you know. Mulch swallowed, his bravado suddenly deserting him. An entire retrieval team? Maybe I should get back underground for the good of the mission. Skipping hurriedly around the groaning bodyguard, Mulch took the steps 2 at a time, which would be really funny considering how short he'd be. No point in worrying about creaking stairs when you've just sent the intestinal equivalent of Hurricane Hal scurrying around the corridors. He'd almost reached the cellar door when a figure shimmered into focus before him. Mulch recognized it as his arresting officer from the Renaissance Master's smuggling case. Captain Short? Mulch, I wasn't expecting to see you. The dwarf shrugged. Julius had a dirty job. Someone had to do it. I get it, Holly nodded. You've already lost your magic. Smart. What did you find out? Mulch showed Holly his find. This was in his safe. A copy of the book, gasped Holly. No wonder we're in this fix. We're playing into his hands all along. Or we were, sorry. Oops. Mulch opened the cellar door. Shall we? I can't. I'm under eyeball orders not to leave the house. You magical types and your rituals. You have no idea how liberating it is to be rid of all that mumbo-jumbo. A series of sharp noises drifted down from the upper landing. It sounded like a troll thrashing around in a crystal emporium. That is an apt description. A phrase which here means that's pretty close to what's about to happen. We can debate ethics at a later date. Right now, I suggest we make ourselves scarce. Mulch nodded. Agreed, this guy took out an entire retrieval squad, apparently. Holly paused, half-shielded. An entire squad? Fully equipped. I wonder. She continued her fade out, and the last thing to go was her widening grin. Cheshire Cat. Mulch was tempted to hang around. There weren't many things more fun than to watch a heavily armed recon officer going to town on a bunch of unsuspecting humans. By the time Captain Short got through with this Fowl character, he'd be begging her to get out of his manor. The Fowl character in question was watching it all from the surveillance room. There was no denying it. Things were not good. Not good at all. But certainly not irredeemable. There was still hope. Artemis cataloged the events of the last few minutes. The manor's security had been compromised. The safe room was in shambles, blown apart by some sort of fairy flatulence. Butler lay unconscious, possibly paralyzed by the same gaseous anomaly. His hostage was loose in the house, her fairy powers restored to her. There was an unsightly creature in leather pants burrowing holes beneath the foundations, with no apparent regard for the fairy commandments, and the people had retrieved a copy of the book, one of several copies as it happened, including one on disc in a Swiss vault. Artemis's finger combed an errant strand of dark hair. He would have to dig very deep to uncover the good in this particular scenario. He took several deep breaths, finding his chi, as Butler had taught him. After several moments' contemplation, he realized that these factors meant little to the overall strategies of both sides. Captain Short was still trapped in the manor, and the time stoppage period was running out. Soon the LEP would have no option but to launch their biobomb, and that was when Artemis Fowl would unveil his coup de grace, I think is how it's pronounced. Of course, the whole thing depended on Commander Root. If Root was intellectually challenged, or as intellectually challenged as he looked, or me apparently, it was quite possible the entire scheme would collapse around his ears. Artemis hoped fervently that someone on the ferry team had the wit to spot the blunder he'd made during the negotiation session. Mulch unbuttoned his back flap, time to suck some dirt, as they say down in the mines. The trouble with dwarf tunnels is that they were self-sealing, so that if you had to go back the way you came, there was a whole new burrow to be excavated. Some dwarfs retraced their steps exactly, chewing through the last compact and pre-digested dirt. Mulch preferred to dig a fresh tunnel. For some reason, eating the same dirt twice didn't appeal to him. Ew, that's a good point. Unhinging his jaw, the dwarf pointed himself torpedo-like through the hole in the floorboards. His heart calmed immediately as the scent of minerals filled his nostrils. Safe. He was safe. Nothing could catch a dwarf underground. Not even a Scalian rockworm? That was, of course, if he managed to get underground. 10 very powerful fingers gripped Mulch by the ankles. This wasn't just the dwarf's day. This just wasn't the dwarf's day. There we go. First ward face, now this homicidal human. Some people never learn. Usually mud people. There you go, he mumbled, unhinged jaw flapping uselessly. Not a chance, came the reply. The only way you're leaving this house is in a body bag. Mulch could feel himself being dragged backward. This human was strong. There weren't many creatures that could dislodge a dwarf with a grip on something. He scrambled in the dirt, cramming handfuls of wine-impregnated clay into his cavernous mouth. There was only one chance. Come on, you little goblin, out of there. Goblin! Mulch would have been indignant had he not been busy chewing clay to eject his enemy. The human stopped talking. Possibly he had noticed the flap, and probably what was behind it. No doubt what had happened in the safe room was coming back to him. Oh, I think we know, but what would have followed the "oh" is anyone's guess. But I'd be willing to bet that it wouldn't have been "dearie me." As it happened, Butler never had time to finish his expletive because he wisely chose that moment to relinquish his grip. A wise choice indeed, because it coincided with the instant Mulch decided to launch his earthen offensive. Ew. A lump of compacted clay sped like a cannon directly at the spot where Butler's head had barely been a second previously. I would have said a second prior, anyway. Had it still occupied that space, the impact would have separated it from Butler's shoulders, and a notable end for a bodyguard of his caliber. As it was, the soggy missile barely grazed his ear. Nevertheless, the force was sufficient to spin Butler like an ice skater, landing him on his rump for the second time in as many minutes. By the time his vision had settled, the dwarf had disappeared into a maelstrom of churning muck. Butler decided not to attempt pursuit. Dying below ground was not very high on his things-to-do list, but there will be another day. Very, he thought grimly. And there was to be, but that's another story. Mulch's momentum propelled him underground. He'd gone several yards along the loamy vein before he realized no one was following. Once the taste of earth had settled his heart rate, he decided it was time to implement his escape plan. The dwarf altered his course, chewing his way toward the rabbit warren he noted earlier. With any luck, the centaur hadn't run the seismology test on the manor grounds, or his ruse might be discovered. He'd just have to bank on the fact that they had more important things to worry about than a missing prisoner. There shouldn't be any problem deceiving Julius, but the centaur, he was a smart one. Mulch's internal compass steered him true, and within minutes he could feel the gentle vibrations of the rabbits flopping along their tunnels. From here on, timing was crucial if the illusion was to be effective. He slowed his digging rate, poking the soft clay gently until his fingers breached the tunnel wall. Mulch was careful to look the other way, because whatever he saw would be showing up on the view screen back in LEP HQ. Laying his fingers on the tunnel floor like an upturned spider, Mulch waited. It didn't take long. In seconds, he felt the rhythmic thump of an approaching rabbit. The instant the animal's hind legs brushed the trap, he tightened his powerful digits around its neck. The poor animal never had a chance. Sorry, friend, thought the dwarf. If there was any other way... Pulling the rabbit's body through the hole, Mulch rehinged his jaw and began screaming, cave in, help, help! Now for the tricky bit. With one hand, he agitated the surrounding earth, bringing showers of it crumbling around his own head, and with the other hand, he popped the iris cam out of his left eye and slid it into the rabbit's. Given the almost total darkness and the landfall confusion, it should be impossible to spot the switch. Julius, please help me! Mulch, what's happening? What's your status? What's my status? Thought the dwarf incredulously. Even in times of supposed crisis, the commander couldn't abandon his precious protocol. And now I am the dead. Anyway. It's been a while since I watched that video. The dwarf dragged his final scream out, petering off into a gargling rattle. A bit melodramatic, perhaps, but Mulch never could resist theatrics. With a last regretful glance at the dying animal, he unhinged his jaw and finned off to the southeast. Freedom beckoned. Whew! Well, that was fun. Alright, now I just gotta wait and see what time my package should arrive. What was I gonna say? Oh well. Let me know what you guys think. I'm gonna go make some breakfast. Although I guess at this point it would be more like brunch. I feel like I had something I wanted to talk about, but I can't think of it. So until next time, goodbye everybody. Man, that's gonna bother me.